That seems fair. Sure, he'd probably like to be higher than that, but we're not going to put him higher than that. He's a top 10 quarterback of all time. I don't think that's up for debate, and it just speaks to what he's done over his career, and I think it's a worthy ranking for him for sure. I think you'd be hard-pressed to put any quarterback. Now, I know these rankings are a lot more than pure talent. It's what have you won, and in that regard, say Tom Brady's obviously ahead of most quarterbacks, all of them. But in terms of pure talent, arm talent, you'd have a hard time putting anybody above Aaron Rodgers. So in that regard, I think you would put Aaron Rodgers above Brett Favre. Now, don't get me wrong, they've both won a Super Bowl. Granted, people think they should have won more, but in terms of pure talent, Brett Favre was, I don't want to use the word reckless, but he took more chances. There was more risk reward with him probably. But in terms of IQ of the game, ability to make any throw anywhere on the field, processing before and after the snap, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody to ever play this game that tops Aaron Rodgers in that regard. Much like Patrick Mahomes, he used to, he still can, maybe less often, make any throw anywhere on the field from any body angle. Now, he's not the most athletic of quarterbacks, obviously. We've seen guys like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen in recent years show that athleticism. But in terms of being able to place the ball anywhere on the field based on some intricate read, and a lot of times that's why he takes the play clock down to zeros, because he's reading the defense. But being able to read the defense, make any throw anywhere on the field with arm strength that is unparalleled at its peak to really anyone, I would say, in NFL history, I would say that's his biggest strength. Listen, he's a very cerebral player. If I had to choose one word to describe him, getting to know him, it would be cerebral. And like any human would, he uses his past experiences to motivate him for the future. There have been times teachers of his in the past have told him he would never amount to anything, and he's kept those letters. Obviously, on draft day, it was between him and Alex Smith to be the top pick in the 2005 draft, and his hometown 49ers, he grew up idolizing Joe Montana and Steve Young. He famously told a TV reporter after that draft the 49ers are going to regret passing on him now.
How disappointed are you that you will not be a 49er?
Not as disappointed as the 49ers will be that they didn't draft me.
Even someone as great as he is, who's one of the best to ever do what he has done for a living for the past 2 decades, still feels like he has something to prove. And not only something to prove to himself, but something to prove to other people that have doubted him, and that's part of what makes him so great. Aaron Rodgers sees and knows everything that's going on. I think a lot of athletes try to paint the picture that they block out everything that's written or said about them. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but he knows everything that's being said and written. I know from personal experience. I think when these athletes show us that they are human too, instead of just robots like, oh, I don't see anything, I just get on the field and play, it humanizes them. And that's the part about this job that I love, and what I've enjoyed getting to do with him over the years is getting to know him as more than just a player, as a person, whether it's calling me out for something I've written or just talking about something off the record. Seeing that these athletes are more than just players, and he's no different than that, has been a rewarding part of this job. Absolutely. Rodgers has spoken numerous times just in my time covering him about the aura and how special it is to be a quarterback for the Packers. Rodgers goes grocery shopping out in public like any normal human being would. And living in Green Bay these past 4 years, hell, I get recognized in Green Bay. I can only imagine what it's like for him, and he welcomes that. It's a special place to live because, and I don't mean this as a slight, the reason people live there is for the Green Bay Packers. It's a college town with one of the most iconic professional sports franchises ever, right there. During the offseason, it's a ghost town pretty much, but that's what makes it so much more special during football season. And being the quarterback of the Packers, that's something he doesn't take lightly, and the gravitas of that does not get lost on him for sure. That's a good question. It's hard not to say the Super Bowl, because it's his only Super Bowl performance. Now, Obviously, when that was happening, I was 14 years old maybe. But, I remember watching that game and just hearing the lore of it and the legend of it from being around Green Bay and the Packers every day for the past 4 years. Sure, there have probably been games where his numbers have been better, or the jaw-dropping amount of plays he's made have been better. But in terms of stepping up in the moment, making the clutch throw when he needed to, backed up deep in his own territory to Greg Jennings across the middle, it doesn't get much bigger than that. He's still undefeated in Super Bowls. Granted, he's only been to one, but in terms of stepping up in the clutch early in his career, it doesn't get much bigger than that for a young quarterback. I think one of my favorite stories to report on over the years was, I think it was early 2020, when COVID was kind of at its height. And Aaron Rodgers started this thing called the Aaron Rodgers COVID-19 Small Business Relief Fund, where in his hometown of Chico, California, a small town in Northern California where he grew up, he basically donated $1 million and worked with the North Valley Community Foundation to pretty much, and I'm not exaggerating here, to help keep afloat or save altogether 80 struggling small businesses in and around his hometown. So I talked to about a dozen of them, I believe, basically for their stories of life through the pandemic and what Rodgers' help meant to them. And you might remember a couple of years ago, there was a fire that decimated the town of Paradise, California. And Nick's was one of the restaurants in that town that was basically ravaged. And all of their workers basically had to wash their uniforms at work because they didn't have running water at their homes. They were displaced from their homes. Some of them lived in trailers. And then a couple years later, they were on the verge of closing for good because of the pandemic, and Rodgers saved it and basically said, we're going to give you everything you need to stay alive. And that was just one business that I talked to. So, yes, he's an incredible player off the field. You can have whatever opinion you want about how he carries himself off the field. I'm not here to debate that. But I think when we're covering these athletes and looking at them, it's important to look at them as people rather than just athletes. And that's one of my most illuminating reporting experiences I've had, to kind of put a real life situation to this face that everyone sees as kind of this mystical creature almost that has remained out of the private eye for most of his career. So that would probably be one of the coolest reporting experiences I've had that kind of speaks to who he is.